Even though James, Viscount Severn, is the youngest of Queen Elizabeth's grandkids, people often remember how quiet he is. He stood with the royal family at the funeral of the late Queen. His calm attitude almost stole the show. Why don't we hear more about this intriguing young royal? Is it a deliberate choice? Or is there more to his story than meets the eye? You'll find out in today's video. The role of the quiet royal. James, Viscount Severn, is different from the rest of the royal family in a way that keeps me interested. But James has chosen a quieter path and isn't seen much in royal life. His cousins, on the other hand, are always making big news. Because she is Queen Elizabeth II's youngest child, he is very important to the royal family. His life, on the other hand, was very simple, which is not common in the modern kingdom. It's not about fame or being in the news all the time. James isn't seen as much or as often as his cousins George, Charlotte, and Louis, who are always the center of attention at royal events. He shows up at important events like the funeral for the late Queen or big family get-togethers, but he stays out of the way most of the time. This is not a mistake. The Prince of Wales and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, planned for him to have a youth that was as normal as it could be. Well, as normal as a royal child can be. One of the most clear differences between James and his family is that James's life doesn't seem to be connected to the royal family at all. There are a lot of pictures of George, Charlotte, and Louis, and millions of people follow them around. That's why they take the public views they do, which show what the future of the monarchy will be like. James, on the other hand, is not likely to have such. Because of this, he is 15th in line to the throne and can stand back more than his cousins can. Having this area around him has shaped his personal life and given him a sense of freedom that most royals don't have. James's path seems different even when compared to that of William and Harry, who came before him. As kids, William and Harry were always in the public eye, and a lot of information about their lives was kept from the start. For James, the approach has been a lot less aggressive. Because they chose to keep him away from the intense media attention, he has grown up without having to deal with the demands of being a royal star. The fact that James's life is quiet doesn't mean he stays away from his family. On the other hand, his relationship with Lady Louise Windsor, his older sister, is one of the most charming things about his life. People often think of Sophie and Edward as kind and grounded, and they are known for how realistic they are as parents. A lot of work has gone into making sure that James and Louise live outside of royal limits. The bond between James and Lady Louise is very strong. They grew up together in a pretty small royal home because they were the only children of their parents. Louise, who is 4 years older than her brother, has been known as his caretaker. The two are often seen together in public, and it's easy to see how close they are by the way they talk, smile, and look at each other. Whether they're going to a formal event or a family picnic, it's clear that they get along. James's life is now shaped a lot by his family. Especially Sophie's parents have been honest about wanting their children to live healthy lives. Sophie also said that she and Edward try to do their own school runs and take part in daily parenting events as much as they can. This has made James feel less like a royal figure and more like a normal kid. James makes it clear that he comes from a stable home. James is less talkative and shy than his uncles, who are known for having loud personalities or getting into trouble. It's not shyness, it's how he was raised. He has a coolness about him that comes from his past when he speaks in public. James's role as the quiet royal may not make the news very often, but it's an interesting look at how the throne is changing. Because James chose to keep his privacy, his time as a royal has been greatly altered, revealing a new shift within the government. The surprising low profile. James, Viscount Severn, is one of the least well-known members of the royal family. Early on, Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, chose to keep him out of the public eye, which is common before a royal birth. While other young members of the royal family are seen at public events or all over the news, James has been growing up in private, away from the cameras. Our goal was not to protect him, but to give him a life that was as normal as possible. James isn't seen in public as much as other royals. His parents have chosen to keep his life a secret, which doesn't mean he doesn't care or isn't important. They wanted James to be able to enjoy his childhood without being watched all the time by the people. James has been told to take a back seat while his cousins George, Charlotte, and Louis become ready to take on important public roles in the kingdom. This choice shows not only how protective his parents were, but also how the royal family has changed how they act in public these days. James has spent less time in public and more time just being a teenager because he grew up in a quiet area. His life has been very different from the lives of many other young royals because he has not been thrust into the spotlight. It lets him grow up in a pretty normal way, which is a rare gift for someone in his job. By keeping him from seeing too many people, his parents have helped him grow up without the steady attention that comes with being a royal. In this way, James's childhood is very different from how royal people used to be raised. Members of the royal family used to have a lot of public duties when they were young. Both the press and the public paid close attention to their lives. There are still times when his cousins George, Charlotte, and Louis can be seen in public or taking family pictures. For James, though, it's been more about staying low-key. His few visits at important events like the funeral of the late Queen Elizabeth II have only added to his mystique and gotten people interested in the young prince who doesn't seem like any other young man his age. Keeping James out of the spotlight is not only a way to protect him, but also a way to acknowledge that the government is changing its role. People further down the line don't have to be as public as the straight heirs to the throne because they are already famous. James is 15th in line to the throne, but he doesn't have to do anything or meet any standards like his cousins George or Charlotte do. They can be less strict now, which gives James the freedom to choose his own path. James is humble, but people who follow the royal family have grown to respect him. People often wonder about the few times he shows up in public because they help them figure out who he is and what he might become. A royal person who is content to let others take the lead is interesting. It means they don't want to be the center of attention. Because he is so mysterious, James is one of the most interesting young people in the family. People are crazy about James because of what he doesn't do rather than what he does. Magazine covers don't feature him, he's not the subject of many news stories, and he doesn't take part in the public events that make royal life famous. He instead stands for a more quiet and peaceful kind of royalty. People are interested and appreciative because they value a more private life in such a public institution. James's quiet way says a lot, even when he's not around. He presents himself with a quiet confidence that comes from his upbringing. This shows that you don't have to be loud or flashy to make an effect. It's clear that his parents' decision to keep him alone has helped him grow into a young man who is happy with himself, even though everyone else is watching from afar. Moments that made headlines. James Viscount Severn is one of the royal family members who is seen the least, but when he does show up, it's always a big deal. The parties for Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee were one of the most shocking times in recent history. As the royal family gathered to honor the late king's 70-year legacy, James made his presence known in a quiet but strong way. While James stood with his family during the Jubilee pageantry, he quietly gained respect for how calm and natural he seemed. The public usually pays attention to the more senior royals, but James's small efforts made the event feel more cohesive. James acted in a real and grounded way during the Jubilee, which is different from how he usually acts during royal trips. He wasn't trying to be the center of attention, but his polite participation got people's attention. The event served as a reminder that sometimes the public will connect best with the simplest actions, like standing tall, staying active, and showing respect. For a king who doesn't get much attention, this event proved that James was still important and trustworthy, even though he was so young. During the funeral for Queen Elizabeth II's grandma, something else very interesting happened. James stood in for the royal family at this sad event, and the whole world saw him act much older than his years. It wasn't just about him being there, It was also about how he acts. Many royal allies were interested in the older members of the family, but others couldn't help but notice how calm and strong James was. He stood behind his sister, Lady Louise Windsor, in a standard black mourning suit, as an example of how to be polite and respectful. People who follow the royal family began to talk about the pictures of James at the funeral of the Queen. That young man, who was about to turn 13, was at the heart of one of the most touching and important royal events in recent years. Not only did his calmness during the event show how he was raised, but it also showed how his parents, Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, raised him and the values they taught him. Besides these important events, James has also been trooping the color at regular royal events. There is a big party every year on the royal calendar to honor the British King's official birthday. People usually pay attention to the more senior royals, but James's appearance is a nice change of pace. It fits the situation, but the way he acts with a quiet respect still gets people's attention because they like how calm he is. These small but important facts about James make him very interesting. For instance, he hasn't shown much of his personality at less formal royal events very often. His family has seen him laugh, and he has been seen giving people around him a quiet smile. People have grown to love and respect these simple, straightforward events. Even though James is a prince, he is still just a young guy growing up in a very special family. James also likes the earth, which is in line with what his parents believed in. James has been an environmental activist for a long time, and Prince Edward and Sophie seem to share this passion. Royal news has sometimes highlighted his participation in events that are in line with these ideals, even though he doesn't speak in public very often. For instance, people close to him know that he loves being outside and respects nature. These small actions help him fit in with current causes and appeal to young people who care a lot about protecting the environment. James does appear in public, generally for events that are important to the country or his family. One of these times was when he was in a royal event, and he and his family quietly showed how important it is to give back by doing community service. Even though these public events don't happen very often, they show what kind of person James is becoming: grounded, thoughtful, and very aware of his role in the royal family. James's unique image is also affected by the fact that he doesn't get much public attention. James isn't as well known as some royals, whose lives are closely watched. This mysterious quality has only added to his charm. When he does appear, it's usually in stories that focus on how quiet and nice he is in public. For example, James was praised for paying attention at a formal family meeting. People also noticed how naturally calm he was in situations that would normally stress out someone his age. Beyond royal duties, James's personal passions and close bond with Lady Louise reveal the more private side of him. A look into the life of James. James Viscount Severn may be quiet in public, but his private life shows that he has a personality that is shaped by being a royal, responsible person and being a normal person. One of his main hobbies is the beautiful outdoors. Some people have seen James completely lost in nature, whether he's fishing or just relaxing by the lake. People close to the family have seen in silence how much he loves fishing. Along with the people and places around him, this hobby connects him to the traditions that his royal ancestors took on. Aside from his love of the outdoors, James is known for his love of sports. A lot of people know that he loves riding, which not only keeps him moving but also makes him feel free from his royal duties. His childhood was mostly made up of sports, which have helped him develop his confidence and character. It looks like James is a dedicated student at school who loves team sports and enjoys both the competition and the friendship. James is also known for how close he is to Lady Louise Windsor, his older sister. Their bond is very close, even though they are different ages. Louise, who is 4 years older than James, has always been there for him. Not only is she the bigger sister, but she is also a guide and a friend. As siblings, they have a loving and supportive relationship because they grew up together in Bagshot Park and shared many adventures. James and Louise are often seen together at family events, and they are very friendly with each other. Their friendship has clearly had a big impact on James's growth. It gives him a sense of security and grounding in a world that can be hard to handle at times. James seems to have become the kind and thoughtful young king he is today because Louise kept her cool. James's upbringing at Bagshot Park was a mix of royal tradition and a sense of normality. James has spent a lot of his life on the huge land. Bagshot Park is a quiet place away from the public eye. Bagshot is less busy and more private than Buckingham Palace or Kensington, so James and his family can enjoy a more relaxed lifestyle. The estate is surrounded by lush forests and parks, which make it easy to enjoy nature and find new things. This is possibly where James's love of the outdoors began. It's great to be able to fish, ride bikes, and spend time with your family on the grounds without having to worry about public events. Not only do the Windsor at Bagshot Park value the beauty of the estate, they also stress the importance of teaching responsibility. James and Louise were raised knowing their roles in the royal family, which gives them the freedom to do the things they enjoy. James has been able to grow from this unique mix of having a grounded past and being aware of how important it is to him. James depends on school a lot because it lets him hang out with friends and live a pretty normal life. Unlike what most people think of when they think of royal education, James goes to a school that puts a lot of emphasis on both schoolwork and extracurricular activities. This all-around approach helps him learn skills that will help him in any future action, whether it's royal or not. Also, James is known for having a sharp mind. He often digs deep into things that interest him. He brings a calm excitement to everything he does, whether he is working hard on his schoolwork or exploring nature. Even though he is a prince, he is easy to talk to because of these short glimpses into his personality. James stands out by keeping his public and private lives in balance. He is deeply rooted in royal past, but growing up at Bagshot Park has given him a childhood that isn't as shackled by the constant attention that other royals have to deal with. His personality shows this balance. He is sure of himself without being flashy, and he is active without ever trying to get attention. James is even more interesting because he accepts this balance without making a big deal out of it. His hobbies and relationship with Louise, along with other things that happened in his life, show that he is a young man who values simplicity and connection. These things about James not only make him attractive, but they also show what role he might play in the royal family in the future. What lies ahead for James? As he grows, James is at an interesting point. As of now, James has chosen to be more quiet, while his friends George, Charlotte, and Louis are going out more often. This might change as he gets older, but how exactly will he make his own royal spotlight? Or not? There is a lot to think about when it comes to his future, especially since the royal family is changing. Since he is Queen Elizabeth's youngest grandson, his role in the royal family is still developing. James can do a number of things. Will he always have a calmer life? Or will he have to go do what the king wants? Since his family is becoming less well known in the monarchy, he might take on even more authority. Along with his cousins, William and Harry, James hasn't been in the spotlight as much, so it's not clear if he'll become a king like them or take a very different path. Even though he is still young, he will have to make choices that will affect not only his future, but also how he fits into the royal family story in the long run. Under King Charles III, the kingdom should be smaller, and fewer people should be working for the government. Since things are changing, James, who is Prince Edward's son, might have a special duty to fulfill. If the royal duties were made easier, James might find himself in a position where he is needed less often, but still very much. Even though maybe not in the same way as his cousins, he might take part in certain activities and important events. Some people might even think that he represents a more modern and personal royal appearance. His calm personality could be just what the kingdom needs as it grows. This shift in the monarchy's focus could affect how James deals with the people. James might not feel like he has to be in the media all the time like some of the more traditional royals do. This might let him focus on his own interests and hobbies without having to worry about what other people think of him all the time. He seems more calm and collected, which might be a nice change from the louder and more public royal events of the past. In the future, he might spend more time thinking than putting on big shows. Still, what people think of James will definitely affect his future as well. People are always interested in what young royals will do when they grow up. Because his family values private and doesn't follow the rules as much as other royal families, James could become a symbol of simplicity in the monarchy. His quiet but steady presence can motivate people who value modesty and class, in contrast to the highly publicized and often fancy life of the royal family. James's low-key way of life might be just what a lot of people want at a time when a lot of people want a more realistic and grounded view of the royalty. Others, though, think that James will have to take on more duties as he ages, especially if he decides to speak for the royal family in public. As he gets older, people who follow the royal family will likely look to him to see how the government might work in today's world. Will he stay out of the spotlight and keep to himself, or will he follow tradition and be seen as a true king? It will be interesting to see how the conflict between these two ways grows. James doesn't know what will happen in the future, but he does know that he is part of a royal family that is changing. He can still make a name for himself in the monarchy, even if his role will never be as important as that of his relatives. Unlike other younger royals, James's upbringing reflects a shift in how royal responsibilities and personal lives are balanced today, comparing generations. James's life as a king is different from that of many of his cousins, such as Zara Tyndall and Peter Phillips. Zara, who is good at riding horses, and Peter, who has been to a lot of public royal events, have clearly been important parts of royal life since they were young. Both of them were Princess Anne's children, so they learned about royal duties, went to public events, and did good things for others. It's clear that they managed their royal duties with their personal lives, which makes them stand out in the royal family. James, on the other hand, had a calmer childhood. James is the son of Prince Edward and Sophie, Countess of Wessex. He hasn't been as well known in public as his cousins. His parents decided to keep him out of the public eye on purpose. James has not been given such important tasks, while Zara and Peter have been in charge of the royal family at times. The Wessexes have avoided public events more than most royal families, which is not usually the case for a royal family. This new approach draws attention to how things are changing within the royal family. In the past, being a royal meant making public visits and talking to the media all the time. But King Charles III wants the kingdom to be smaller, and James represents a different kind of royal. As a child, he didn't have as many royal duties or public attention as other kids his age. James's addition to the royal family is less obvious than the fact that he is always in the public eye. Not only does King Charles want to reduce the number of royals involved in public life, but he also wants to change the role of the family in society. James is part of the change that means fewer royals will be in charge of representing the crown. His position shows a more modernized royalty, where being in the background is valued, and royal duties are more about being a symbol than about being in the spotlight. James plays a big role in the new government. He is an important part of how his family is changing, even though he doesn't have public duties like his cousins do. His private and quiet approach to royal life is different from what he shows in public. In a broader sense, this shows how people are becoming more aware of limits and privacy in public life. James is a part of this new way of thinking about what it means to be royal, since royals don't have to be seen all the time to do their jobs. One of the most interesting things about James's life is how it challenges common ideas about royalty. In the past, people expected members of the royal family to regularly do public duties and go to important events. James's low-key lifestyle shows that you don't have to follow this strict rule to be a king. The fact that his parents chose to raise him with a focus on personal growth over public appearance shows how the government is moving toward a more modern, individualized approach. As social media and the news have grown, so has the public's view of royal families' lives, such as those of Prince William and Kate Middleton and Harry and Meghan Markle. James, on the other hand, has not had to deal with this much attention as a child. His parents have kept him out of the public eye on purpose, so that he can live a life where growing as a person is more important than how he looks. James lives a low-key life, which is different for modern royalty. Royal families all over the world focus more on symbolic acts and less on fulfilling their public duties. This means that younger royals like James can have more private and quiet lives. This change shows how people feel about royalty. Many people are interested in royals who can balance their personal lives with their royal tasks. James is a simple symbol of this new and changing royalty. James is part of a group that is changing what it means to be royal in the 21st century. He doesn't have as much going on in his life as some of his cousins, but that's how royals live. The royal family's job now is less about going on a lot of public appearances and more about finding a mix between honoring tradition and embracing new ideas. This change in the government is being shaped by James. It will be interesting to see how his role changes in the future. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed watching James and the royal family, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video popping up on your screen for more.